The boy who would not be broken. It begins in stillness. A frost-covered Virginia morning. The year is 1732. In a small farmhouse, a newborn's cry cuts through the quiet. His name? George Washington. To the world, he's just another child. To history, he will become something far greater. George's father, Augustine, is a hard-working planter. His mother, Mary Ball Washington, is fiercely determined, strong-willed, and unyielding. They own land, they have some influence, but they are not aristocrats. From the start, George learns that honor matters more than wealth. That discipline matters more than comfort. Mary makes sure of it. When George is 11, tragedy strikes. Augustine Washington dies suddenly. The boy's life changes overnight. Gone are the dreams of studying in England. Gone is the easy path to success. What remains is the question every child faces in loss. What will you do now?
For George, the answer is simple. He will make himself into something the world cannot ignore. He copies entire books by hand to master penmanship. He studies rules of etiquette, believing good manners can open doors that money cannot. He pores over maps, learning the shape of the world before he's even traveled it. By his teens, Washington is already striking. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet presence that makes people listen. And here's hidden gem number 1. George Washington loved dancing. Yes, the future general of the Continental Army once spun across polished floors in candlelit ballrooms, charming guests with perfect steps. But George's heart isn't in ballrooms. It's in the wild. At 16, he becomes a land surveyor. Days in the forest, nights under the stars, rain dripping through the trees, mosquitoes thick in the air. He learns to endure cold, hunger, and danger. Out here in the wilderness, Washington learns what no classroom could teach: patience, precision, survival.
Then, at 20, comes his first taste of war. The French and Indian War has erupted over land and power. Washington's mission? Deliver a warning to the French to leave the Ohio Valley. Sounds simple, except the journey means crossing hundreds of miles of icy rivers and forests filled with hostile warriors. At one point, a guide turns his musket on him and fires. The shot misses. Washington doesn't flee. He finishes the mission. What does that tell you? This is a man who does not bend. Not when the stakes are high. Not when death is close enough to feel. The war that nearly killed him. The French and Indian War was no place for hesitation. It was brutal, muddy, and unforgiving. Young George Washington had come to prove himself, but the battlefield had other plans. In 1755, he joins General Edward Braddock's expedition against the French. It's supposed to be a decisive strike, a march through the wilderness to take Fort Duquesne. The army is large, confident, maybe too confident. Then the ambush comes. A sudden crack of musket fire. Smoke fills the air. Men shout, stumble, and fall. The enemy? French forces and their native allies attack from the trees, invisible until the moment they strike.
Washington rides hard through the chaos, delivering orders, rallying troops. Bullets rip through the air around him. 2 horses are shot out from under him. 4 holes tear through his coat. But somehow, miraculously, none touch his flesh. Men around him whisper that he must be protected by Providence. Was it luck, fate, or simply the stubborn refusal to die? The expedition is a disaster. Braddock is mortally wounded. Washington takes command, organizing a retreat that saves hundreds of men from slaughter. In that moment, he earns something far more valuable than a victory. He earns a reputation, a young officer with courage, composure, and the ability to lead under fire. But the war teaches him something else. It shows him that courage alone is not enough. Poor planning and arrogance can destroy even the strongest army. From then on, Washington understands. Victory belongs to those who prepare and those who adapt when everything falls apart. When the fighting finally ends, he returns to Virginia. He's known now, respected. But respect doesn't fill the quiet of an empty home. Then he meets Martha Custis, a wealthy widow, elegant and intelligent, with 2 young children. They connect quickly. In 1759, they marry.
With Martha comes love and financial stability. Washington pours his energy into Mount Vernon, expanding the estate, managing crops, and entertaining guests. He becomes a gentleman farmer, and for a while, life is peaceful. But history is already moving. The 1760s bring new laws, new taxes from Britain, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts. The colonies are restless, and in taverns, markets, and town halls, people begin to speak openly of rebellion. Washington watches, listens, and measures his words. He is not reckless. He knows the cost of war. But when the time comes, he will be ready to act. The reluctant commander. The year is 1775. Tensions have been boiling for a decade. Protests, boycotts, and petitions have failed. The spark has finally caught fire. In April, British troops clash with colonial militia at Lexington and Concord. Blood is spilled. The Revolutionary War has begun. Delegates from across the colonies gather in Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress. They need a leader, someone who can unite the colonies, command respect, and face the world's most powerful military. All eyes turn to George Washington. He does not lobby for the job. In fact, he sits quietly in the hall, wearing his military uniform, saying little. But his presence speaks volumes. Tall, dignified, a man known for discipline and honor. When they ask him to command the Continental Army, he hesitates. He knows what's coming. Years of blood, hardship, and sacrifice. But in the end, he says yes. Not for glory, but because he believes the cause is just. The army he inherits is not really an army at all. It's a ragtag collection of farmers, tradesmen, and volunteers. Many have never held a musket. Supplies are scarce. Training is minimal. But Washington understands that soldiers are made, not born. From the moment he takes command, he is everywhere, inspecting camps, drilling men, enforcing discipline. He demands respect, but earns it in return. The war is brutal from the start. Defeat at Brooklyn Heights, a desperate retreat across New Jersey. By December 1776, the army is shrinking. Soldiers are cold, hungry, and ready to go home. Washington knows that without a bold move, the revolution will die before it's truly begun.
On Christmas night, he takes the gamble. Under cover of darkness, Through freezing wind and ice, he leads his men across the Delaware River. By dawn, they strike at Trenton, catching the enemy off guard. It's a stunning victory, small in numbers, massive in morale. The war will rage for years more. Washington will face bitter winters, mutinies, and crushing defeats. But the crossing of the Delaware proves something vital. The revolution may bend, but it will not break.
By spring, the army that limped into Valley Forge is not the same one that marches out. They are leaner, harder, sharper, and ready to face the enemy again. Hidden gem number 2. During the Revolutionary War, Washington refused a salary. He only asked to be reimbursed for his expenses. Even in the Army's darkest days, he never fought for personal gain. The coming years are still hard. There will be defeats, disappointments, and betrayals. But Valley Forge proves one thing: the Continental Army can endure anything if it stands together. The Trap at Yorktown. It is the year 1781. The war has dragged on for 6 long years. The British still hold key cities. The American army is tired, battered, but not broken. Then, a chance. British General Cornwallis moves his troops to Yorktown, Virginia, a position that can be surrounded. Washington sees the opportunity instantly. But taking it will require speed, secrecy, and luck.
He devises a daring plan. Instead of attacking New York, as the British expect, he quietly marches his army south, over 400 miles in less than 6 weeks. The French army, under General Rochambeau, marches with him. The French Navy, commanded by Admiral de Grasse, sails to block the British from escape by sea. By late September, Yorktown is encircled. Washington's artillery begins to pound the British defenses. Day and night the cannons roar. Earthworks crumble. The British position grows desperate. Then comes the final assault. Washington himself fires the first gun of the bombardment. American and French troops storm the redoubts, fierce, close-quarters fighting with bayonets and musket butts. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrenders. The war, for all practical purposes, is over. America is free. Washington's victory makes him the most powerful man in the new nation. The army would follow him anywhere. The people would crown him king if he wished.
But here's the twist. He doesn't want a crown. Instead, he does something that shocks the world. He resigns his commission and returns to Mount Vernon. Hidden gem number 3. When King George III heard Washington had given up power voluntarily, he called it the greatest act of any man. For a brief moment, it seems Washington's public life is over, but the nation he fought for is fragile, and its leaders soon realize they need him again. The First President. It is 1789. The ink on the U.S. Constitution is barely dry. The United States is not yet a country in the way we know it today. It's a fragile union of states bound more by hope than by strength. The people need a leader they can trust, someone who can unite the country, calm rivalries, and guide the nation without abusing power. There's only one name on everyone's lips: George Washington.
He doesn't campaign. He doesn't need to. In fact, he'd rather stay at Mount Vernon, tending his fields. But when duty calls, Washington never turns away.
The vote is unanimous. George Washington becomes the first president of the United States. He knows the weight of the office. Every choice he makes will set a precedent, so he walks carefully. He builds the first presidential cabinet, Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Knox as Secretary of War. He shapes the role of the president as a leader of the people, not a ruler over them. He visits every state to show that the government is not some far-off, untouchable power, but something close and real. He deals with crises, the nation's war debt, the Whiskey Rebellion in Pennsylvania, tensions with Britain and France. Through it all, Washington leads with restraint. He resists calls to go to war too soon. He keeps the young republic out of foreign entanglements. And in doing so, he buys the United States time to grow stronger.
Hidden gem number 4. Washington never lived in the White House. The Capitol was in New York City during his first term, then Philadelphia for his second. The White House wouldn't be completed until after his presidency. By the end of his second term, Washington is tired. The job has taken its toll. Some beg him to stay for a third term, but he refuses, believing no leader should hold power for too long. In 1796, he delivers his farewell address, a warning against political parties, against foreign entanglements, against the divisions that could tear the young nation apart. And then he walks away. Once again, the most powerful man in America chooses to give up power. The final chapter. It is 1797. George Washington is once again a private citizen. He returns to Mount Vernon, his beloved estate on the banks of the Potomac River. The fields are wide, the air is peaceful. For the first time in decades, he is free from the constant pull of war and politics. But Washington is not idle. He manages his farm with military precision, experimenting with crop rotation, new tools, and livestock breeding. He writes letters, advises younger leaders, and keeps a watchful eye on the fragile republic he helped build. Occasionally, the government still calls on him. When tensions with France threaten war, President John Adams appoints him as Commander-in-Chief of the Army, though Washington hopes it won't come to fighting again. The winter of 1799 arrives cold and wet. In December, after riding through his estate in freezing rain, Washington develops a sore throat. By the next day, he struggles to breathe. Doctors try to help, but their methods are limited. Within 2 days, George Washington is gone. It is December 14th, 1799. He is 67 years old. News of his death spreads quickly. The nation mourns as one. Even his former enemies in Britain pay tribute. Napoleon orders 10 days of mourning in France. Hidden gem number 5. Washington was so revered that the U.S. Capitol was later named in his honor, making him the only U.S. president to have a capital city bear his name. In the days that follow, people try to put his life into words: leader, soldier, statesman. But perhaps the truest title is the one history gives him: the father of his country.
His legacy is more than battles won or offices held. It's the example he set of humility, of service, of leadership without greed. He proved that power could be given up willingly, and that a nation could be led by the will of the people, not the rule of a king. Over 2 centuries later, his face still looks out from the dollar bill. His name is spoken in classrooms, carved into monuments, remembered in every corner of the United States. George Washington's story is not just the story of one man. It's the story of the birth of a nation, a story that will always remind us what true leadership looks like.
If this story inspired you, tap that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss any updates.